A moment in history. Ukraine's president becomes the first head of state to address the House of Commons.
You now have the floor. President.
Standing ovation for President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Speaking to MPs from his secure base in Kiev, he implored Britain to give more help to his war-torn country.
We will fight in the forest, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets. We will fight on the banks of the rivers, and we are looking for your help.
President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is standing firm for democracy and for freedom. In his righteous defence, I believe he has moved the hearts of everybody in this House.
Boris Johnson also announced the UK and the US will unite to ban Russian gas and oil. Now it'll hit Moscow hard, but Western economies will suffer too. Also ahead. A fragile temporary ceasefire allows a few to escape to safety. 2 million have now fled. At 7, joining the foreign fighters, the Britons heading to Ukraine, but should they be there?
Have you been given a gun as well?
Yeah, we will be armed, yes.
And a serial bully and liar. John Bercow's reputation is shredded by a damning report into his time as Commons Speaker.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. In historic scenes, Ukraine's president has addressed MPs in the House of Commons, urging them to do everything they can to help his country fight off Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelenskyy was given a standing ovation both before and after he spoke via a video link from a secure base in Kiev. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy invoked Sir Winston Churchill's famous wartime speech, saying Ukrainians will fight in the forests, the fields, the shores and the streets. He said his people don't want to lose their country, and he appealed for greater sanctions against Moscow. The UK and the US did just that tonight, announcing that they will ban Russian oil imports and products. But President Zelenskyy still hasn't got the no-fly zone he so desperately wants. Here's our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan.
Even before he began his historic address, President Zelenskyy received a standing ovation in the House of Commons. When he spoke of resistance, but also of atrocities.
We do not want to lose what we have, what is ours, our country, Ukraine, just as you once didn't want to lose your country when Nazis started to fight you.
He quoted Shakespeare.
The question for us now is to be or not to be, the Shakespearean question. For 15 days this question could have been asked, but now I give you a definite answer. Yes, to be.
And in the end, he quoted Churchill.
We will fight in the forest, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets. We will fight on the banks of the rivers, and we are looking for your help, for the help of the civilized countries.
The Prime Minister responded, pledging more support.
Britain and our allies are determined to press on with supplying our Ukrainian friends with the weapons they need to defend their homeland as they deserve. To press on with tightening the economic vice around Vladimir Putin, and we will stop importing Russian oil.
And it was a moment of unity.
Labour stands for the toughest sanctions that will cripple the Russian state. Labour stands for providing Ukraine with the arms it needs to fight off their invaders.
World leaders have addressed Parliament before, some of the most notable speakers, Mandela, Obama, from here in Westminster Hall. But none has ever addressed MPs in the Commons chamber before, let alone by video link from a war zone.
It's difficult to hear somebody who is facing such an onslaught, leading his country bravely. In some respects, you could almost argue he's leading world opinion bravely.
It was an extraordinary address which may well have added steel to the mood in Parliament and may yet need to, as the cost of opposing the invasion of Ukraine rises steadily. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
One turn to the panel.
Well, our political editor Robert Peston joins us from the Commons. Now, Robert, incredible, I mean, historic event, an amazing ovation and reception for Volodymyr Zelenskyy. But will he be satisfied with what he's actually come away with?
So look, maybe I'm getting soft because I found President Zelenskyy's address, his description of the privations that his people are suffering, and the unity we saw in the House of Commons profoundly moving. But there is, as I heard from ministers and MPs subsequent to his talk, a limit to what the UK can do. He asked for more sanctions. He asked for more protection of the skies above Ukraine, to do more to prevent those missiles raining down and to keep in check Russian planes. Ministers are making clear there won't be a no-fly zone policed by NATO. There is this question of whether Poland will supply MiGs to the Ukraine, that's fighters to the Ukrainian Air Force, but there are high stakes for Poland in doing that. And yes, as you will hear later in the programme, there have been more sanctions announced today. We are phasing out all use of Russian oil. America is phasing out oil and gas from Russia, and the EU is reducing that by 2/3. So more has been done. I'm afraid for President Zelenskyy, it isn't yet enough.
All right, Robert Peston in Parliament, thank you very much for that. And announcing the ban on Russian oil imports and oil products, US President Joe Biden said it will be a powerful blow to the Russian economy. Well, our US correspondent Emma Murphy is in Washington tonight. And Emma, a strong measure, undoubtedly. What is America hoping that it will achieve?
Well, the aim of this is to deprive Russia of money that could be used to fund the war in Ukraine, and also to seek to further isolate Russia from the global economy. It is a very strong measure from America. It's not being matched by the EU because their dependence is much greater. This is what the president had to say when he was announcing it.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country. And if we do not respond to Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, the cost of freedom and to the American people will be even greater tomorrow.
But President Biden did go on to say that the price of freedom would also be paid by people in this country and elsewhere in the West as these prices start to rise for gas and oil. Already we're seeing record-breaking levels here. The thought is that if they can stop buying the 700,000 barrels that they buy from Russia every single day, the money will decrease there. But really, it is the European market that has got the very big reliance, and that is where the big money goes into Russia from.
OK, Emma Murphy in Washington, thank you. Well, as President Zelenskyy addressed MPs here, some of his country's civilians were finally given a safe humanitarian corridor to escape the fighting. This is the current situation on the ground. Russian-controlled areas are shown in red. Soldiers are advancing from the north, the south and the east, and several cities are now in a state of siege, with hundreds of thousands of civilians in fear for their lives. Today, a humanitarian corridor was finally established to take some civilians from the city of Sumy south to Poltava, but only briefly, as our Europe editor James Mates reports.
After days of broken promises, today the first evacuations from the horrors of the northern town of Sumy. Though the good news wasn't to last long, only the first of many planned convoys made it out before the shelling started again. This is what the civilian population are trying to escape. Above ground, scarcely imaginable levels of damage as a modern, thriving town is razed to the ground, its people surviving in cellars and bunkers. Evacuation buses headed for the southern city of Mariupol this morning. For a fourth time, there was a promise of ceasefire and evacuation, but once again that promise was broken. The vehicles never returned. Pictures have now emerged of life in the centre of Mariupol during a lull in the near-constant shelling. Building after building shattered beyond repair, shops empty, power, water, heat, long gone. We have nothing, this woman tells the camera. No food, no electricity, no medicine. We have nothing. Despite the appalling suffering of so many women in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin saw fit to make a special address to mark International Women's Day. The only ones on his mind were the partners of the men he'd sent to war.
I would like to address the mothers, wives, sisters, brides and girlfriends of our soldiers and officers who are now in battle defending Russia during a special military operation. I understand how you worry about your loved ones.
The man whose troops are actually defending their country, Ukraine's President Zelenskyy, once again proved to his people that he is still in the capital, still unafraid of being captured or killed, recording himself walking from the streets of Kiev to his well-protected office. But outside, columns of Russian armour continue to advance through his country with greater difficulty than anyone expected, but still moving forward. The people of Mykolaiv, the last barrier before the Black Sea city of Odessa, are leaving while they still can, the mayor expecting a new offensive imminently.
A lot of people are moving out of the city in the Odessa direction, in the west side of Ukraine and abroad. But let's say people who can hold weapon, they are ready to defend our city and to fight with the Russian occupants.
Russian losses continue to be horrendous and highly visible. Between 2,000 and 4,000 dead so far, according to the CIA's latest estimate. But still they move forward, and still Ukrainian cities are in peril.
And James is in Kiev tonight. So, James, what is the latest you can tell us about the progress of the Russian offensive?
Yeah, well, two significant movements we're learning about. We know that the thrust towards Kiev from the north west has been pretty much stopped for a week or so, but a second thrust, effectively a pincer movement coming from the northeast, is now within about 25 miles of Kiev, with the danger, of course, that will divide the defenders. But also down in the south on the Black Sea coast, the town of Mykolaiv, apparently the Russian armour is now close to encircling that town and putting it in the same position as Mariupol is in. One other significant piece of news from the battlefront is that a Russian Major General called Vitaly Gerasimov has been killed at the front. Now, this is interesting for two reasons. It's very unusual for an officer that senior to be anywhere near the front and in that much danger. So it does suggest that senior officers are having to go forward in order to organise their men and urge them forward. But secondly, they know that he's dead because Russian secure communications seem to have broken down, and they picked up the report of his death from a Russian soldier using a Ukrainian SIM card, which is quite indicative of the state of Russian preparedness.
All right, James, all interesting stuff. Stay safe and thank you. Well, the UN now says more than 2 million people have yet left Ukraine since the invasion started. And while their friendly neighbours are more than happy to help, some are struggling with the sheer numbers. Moldova is a small country and has asked for international support. Our correspondent Peter Smith is in the village of Palanka, which is right on the border with Ukraine. And Peter, how are they coping there?
Well, everything our team here in Moldova has witnessed tells us they are on the cusp of no longer being able to cope. To put it into context, we reported last night that in the first 10 days of war, Moldova added 10% onto its population with refugees. We'll add another 1% onto that today alone. These numbers are not sustainable for Europe's smallest and poorest nation, and that's why Moldova is pleading with the international community to take this crisis seriously and do more to help.
This border crossing in Moldova is just 35 miles from Odessa in Ukraine. And as Putin's army closes in there, these queues get longer.
We are alive. We are alive.
Those fleeing are almost all women and children. Ukraine instructed its men of fighting age to defend the country. But at the Moldovan crossing today, we found a rare sight: Ukrainian men.
Why have you decided to leave?
Yeah, because it's dangerous for me, for my family, and I'm the one who earned the money.
Dimitri's here with a pregnant wife and 2 children. He wants to be anonymous.
Was it a difficult decision for you?
It's a very difficult decision. Because we are proud of our country, so We are very worried we are leaving, but...
Dimitro isn't the only one.
This is the only point close to Odessa where men can be refugees. We can be safe here, but back home they're bombing us. It's a genocide what Russia is doing.
Close to this border, we found an American living here. He told us why he's given shelter to some Ukrainian men.
Born and bred Odessa people don't want to fight. They kind of identify, they're not for the Russian invasion, obviously, but they kind of identify as Russian in Odessa itself, and they don't want to fight Russians.
Those who do reach Moldova seek safe haven in one of Europe's smallest and poorest countries. Their main refugee centre has already run out of camp beds, so new arrivals have just a mattress on the floor.
It's a bit cold here, and my back hurts sleeping like this.
Moldova has asked for international help with the refugee crisis looming here, and there is growing anger.
If Moldova takes us in, they should treat us with dignity. We didn't come here because we wanted to. We ran away and left our homes.
Back on the border, Ukrainians stand in a blizzard at the doors of Moldova. Fleeing Odessa, they endure this nightmare here because they know hell is now behind them. Peter Smith, ITV News, Palanca.
Well, here, Conservative MPs have joined in the criticism of the Home Office's slow response in allowing Ukrainian refugees into the UK. Hundreds of applicants waiting in Calais are faced with a chaotic system. And that was matched in Westminster today with the confusion over government claims that it had set up a new visa application centre. From Calais, Chloe Keedy reports on the difficulties people are still facing.
Dave and his 7-year-old daughter are packing up for the last leg of a journey that started 2 weeks ago. Today is the first time they've known with any certainty where it will end. The family left their home in eastern Ukraine when the bombs started falling. What they saw on their way to the border, Dave says he cannot forget.
I come across artillery, Ukrainian artillery blown up, dead soldiers on the side of the road, absolutely heartbreaking stuff. Had to drive through fire in the car, got the kids to close their eyes.
They made it over the border, but getting across the channel has been another ordeal. After a week sleeping in a hotel in Calais, this morning they finally got their visas from the Home Office.
I think they've handled it very badly. I don't think they put enough in place. I don't think they realise the scale.
This still appears to be the sum total of the Home Office operation in Calais. Yesterday, the Home Secretary promised a new visa application centre en route to the port. But today, the government announced it's setting one up in a different city 60 miles away.
The Home Office have placed staff in Poland and Hungary to help people. They've also, the Home Secretary has announced a new pop-up application site in Lille.
But that's not much help to Misha and his family, who have already been waiting in Calais for a week to get their visa appointment.
Finally, today, we made it to like a 15th at March. Yeah,
1 week from now?
1 week from now on, yeah.
And where do you have to go for that?
I have to go back to Brussels.
Amidst all the confusion, the Mayor of Calais told us there are two clear solutions.
Donc il y a deux solutions.
Either their visa requests are handled on arrival in the UK, or there should be no need for papers in an emergency situation like this. The city's main refuge centre is now completely full, and more families are arriving here every day. Well, the government today defended its need to carry out checks at the border, saying that a number of people have already been caught here in Calais, trying to get through with false documents, pretending to be Ukrainian. It has now issued 500 visas, but that is a fraction of the number of applications it's had. And there is a growing sense of frustration amongst people here tonight who still don't know when they'll be able to leave or indeed where they'll be able to go.
Chloe Keedy in Calais, thank you. Well, there is plenty more still to come in the ITV Evening News, including preparing to fight. The Britons heading out to Ukraine who have no idea what lies in store or even if it's legal.
The bag and the helmet are from a friend. I could be driving an ambulance, I could be driving a tank.
Finally settled, Prince Andrew has now paid the millions to dismiss his sex assault case. Plus, why an unreleased Ed Sheeran song was accidentally played during his copyright trial today. That was proven to be quite a court case. We're going to have the latest on that and more after the break, so do stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the ban on Russian oil imports announced by the UK and the US that we reported on a little bit earlier will not just hurt President Putin, of course. It's also going to cause economic pain in the West, with fuel and energy prices set to soar even higher. Petrol prices have already been rising in the UK at their fastest rate for 18 years. So the cost of living crisis is going to get worse before it gets better, as Hannah Miller now reports.
As a carer for her disabled husband, Sue uses his disability allowance to lease a car they rely on to get around.
Well, it was this morning I was driving down here and I thought, oh my gosh, what if I can't afford fuel?
Today she visits a charity to get discounted food for her family, the cost of eating, heating and petrol mounting up.
What difference would it make for you if fuel goes up even more now?
Well, we'll be stuck in at home. I can't think of what's going to happen in a few weeks' time, in another month's time. I've got to just focus on now. I just don't think about the future.
The cost of filling up a typical family car has increased by more than £2 in just the last week, with the cost of petrol up 3.8 pence a litre and diesel now 5.2 pence more expensive, the biggest percentage rise since 2003. And that's before the government announced today it will stop the import of Russian oil products by the end of the year.
If we'd announced a ban immediately, that would have had a really serious impact on prices. I think this phased approach strikes a good balance.
Only around 8% of the UK's oil products come from Russia. But as countries move away from Russian imports, the price of a barrel will go up. And ultimately, that means even higher prices at the pumps. Today, one think tank warned of the biggest squeeze on living standards in almost 50 years.
That's a fall of about £1,000 per household in real terms, and it's also the worst household income fall we've seen since the mid-1970s.
At a time when many families already have no money to spare. Hannah Miller, ITV News, Bradford.
Well, our consumer editor Chris Choi is at a petrol station tonight. Chris, a lot of motorists are going to be really worried about this. So how bad do you think things are likely to get?
Well, the UK is far less reliant on Russian energy than most of Europe, only about 8% of our oil. And by phasing this ban in, it's at least hoped there'll be time to find alternative supplies, for example, from Saudi Arabia. But already experts are warning that this is likely to push crude oil prices much higher. Already today, the RAC is predicting we'll reach 160p a litre by the end of this week. And already in many places, such as here, the price is above that. It will head even further, with growing concerns that wages and welfare payments are failing to keep up with this price surge.
All right, Chris Choi in central London, thank you for that. A little bit of news just breaking this evening, and in the last hour, McDonald's has announced the temporary closure of all 850 of its Russian restaurants. It had faced criticism for failing to speak out about the invasion, but tonight the fast food chain's boss admitted they cannot ignore the needless human suffering in Ukraine. And the Premier League has suspended a broadcasting deal with unanimous backing of all 20 clubs. It means games will no longer be shown in Russia. So as the global support for Ukraine continues to grow inside the country, its people are resisting in any way they can. From building petrol bombs in their garages to repurposing factories to build military defences, residents are coming up with many innovative ways to fight back, as our correspondent Romilly Weeks reports from Lviv.
In the bitter cold of Lviv spring, Ukrainians are forging their resistance. This factory used to make wood-burning stoves. But people here aren't thinking about how to heat their homes now, just how to stop them burning. So they're working without pay, using donated metal, their skills and their fury to make the stinger chains and anti-tank barricades that now crisscross every road. It was a peaceful, normal factory, the owner tells me, but we had to do something, and this was better than waiting for things to hit us from the sky. The spirit of Ukrainian resistance is strong in every corner of this city. In the cybersphere, the war has now transcended the country's borders.
Okay, so I'm going to launch an attack.
Displaced himself from Kyiv, Sasha shows me how he and an international army of tech experts are simultaneously flooding Russian government websites until they crash.
So you are taking down Russian sites, key Russian sites, by flooding their servers?
Yeah, not me personally, but all of us. We're all in this together. So it works when there's a massive amount of attackers, of users. And yeah, on the first few days, most of the government sites had been taken down. So Kremlin.ru, the FSB website.
Taking the fight to the country considered the world's cyber warfare specialist is giving people here hope.
A lot of people, my friends, all just everybody having this survivor's guilt, and for people to be able to participate in something, it takes down the survival guilt and keeps their mental health in check.
Under the crucifix in the garage where he normally mends motorbikes, Sergei is also doing what he can. Alcohol is banned in Lviv now. Molotov cocktails are not.
Ми це почали робити з першого дня оголошення війни, тому що ми...
Almost in tears, as he tells me, because we've decided to stay with our families, we have to find a way to protect them.
The anti-tank barricades are spread around the entrances to every Ukrainian town and city now at these checkpoints. There is no suggestion yet that the Russians will try and advance as far west as Lviv. But no one here is unaffected by this war, and everyone is doing whatever they can to defend their country. Romilly Weeks, ITV News in Lviv.
You are watching the ITV Evening News. Here's what's still ahead before Emmerdale. In just a moment, why the Georgian Legion is training up Brits to fight in Ukraine. But is what they're doing actually legal? John Bercow's fury at being banned from Parliament. He denies being a bully and a liar.
This process stinks. Indeed, to call it a kangaroo court is deeply unfair and insulting to kangaroos.
Prince Andrew pays up and shows his face in public after settling his sex assault case. How Ed Sheeran serenaded the court during his copyright trial.
And why it could hit 16 degrees later in the week. Has spring finally sprung?
But before all that, ITV News has spoken to British men who are taking up arms and joining the fight to defend Ukraine. They're fighting with the Georgian Legion, which was first set up after Russia's invasion of Crimea. We followed two of the Brits as they travelled to the Polish border. Now, despite having no military experience, they told us they couldn't simply stand by as civilians are being targeted. Other British fighters already inside Ukraine say they've given up jobs and they're prepared to stay for however long it takes. And it's not yet clear whether what they're actually doing is legal. Our UK editor Paul Brand has this special report.
Leon Dawson trains most days,
Still that tightness there. Yeah.
but never for what he's about to undertake. From running a gym in West London to running supplies into Ukraine, he's decided to join the war effort.
Have you got any military training at all?
No military training whatsoever, no. I've been camping a few times as a kid, and yeah, I've shot a gun on holiday once at a shooting range.
But a war zone is going to be a very different place, right? You know that?
I can imagine so, yeah. Yeah, I've seen some of the footage on the news, and it's scary, really scary.
And yet you still want to put yourself in the middle of all that?
Yeah. Yeah, because people are in the middle of all that have had no choice. If I can do something about it, I'm gonna.
His main mission is humanitarian help, but he's also prepared to fight.
The bag and the helmet are from a friend. I could be driving an ambulance, I could be driving a tank. So I've got no idea what's going to be happening.
Neither does his companion Kai, who he's never met before. With a van full of aid, they'll drive all the way to the Ukrainian border together. They are not the only ones making the journey. On our flight out to meet them in Poland, the camouflage did anything but disguise others heading in the same direction.
This is a rail for a firearm.
These American veterans met at the airport to share kit.
It's easy to tweet that you support Ukraine, have a flag outside your house, but donating money's good too, but they need people here.
If our government doesn't want to intervene, and if they allow us to go, then we have the duty to go.
By the time we land in Poland, Leon and Kai are halfway across Europe, but nervous about completing their trip.
We're stopping off at an army shop to get some body armour, to get ourselves fully equipped. We're hearing in the east a lot of civilians are being shot at.
Does that give you second thoughts about going in?
Yes, sort of, but we just want to go in and do the best we can, help people escape.
We've reached the Ukrainian border just ahead of Leon and Kai. Others from Britain have done too. We're aware of dozens, perhaps hundreds, who've already crossed into the country, ready to cross fire with Russian soldiers.
Some of them are in these videos, filmed for us by the Georgian Legion, which is training British fighters in Ukraine. Like this 21-year-old from the West Midlands.
Basically, any training that a normal military will go through, we are going through day to day. The guys, there's a lot of guys here with experience, so they're really looking out for us.
Are you prepared to shoot that gun, possibly shoot a Russian soldier?
If push comes to shove, and if it's my life on the line or my brother's next to me, then that is the option there, yeah.
Officially, the UK's Foreign Office says don't join them, but ministers haven't always agreed. This second fighter from northwest England doesn't know if he'll be investigated on his return.
Are you clear on whether or not you should be in Ukraine under UK law?
Well, I was actually stopped in the airport trying to fly out here by the counter-terror police. They stopped me boarding my flight. Said they'll have negotiators getting in touch with me to try and help me to leave Ukraine, etc. I told them I don't care. So possibly when I go home, they're going to arrest me. How they deal with that, the laws could change any day. We could wake up tomorrow morning, there could be a terrorist.
Back across the border, Leon and Kai are just reaching Ukraine, where they meet thousands of refugees moving in the opposite direction.
We're going to take our van inside over the border to help more people like you.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.
Does it change your mind at all seeing the scale of this disaster?
It's devastating to see the impact, but I still feel the same. I want to get in there and help.
Tonight, they are attempting to cross. Britain isn't entering this war, but there are Britons going in. Paul Brandt, ITV News, Poland.
OK, well, let's get an update on what's making the news tonight. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy has been given a standing ovation by the House of Commons after addressing MPs and vowing to fight on against Russia. As part of the government's response, Boris Johnson followed the US president's speech by announcing a joint ban with the US on Russian oil. Well, tonight, McDonald's has bowed to pressure and will temporarily close all of its restaurants in Russia. Now let's move on to some of today's other news now. And the former House of Commons Speaker, John Bercow, is a serial bully and a liar, an independent inquiry has found. It followed complaints about his bad-tempered behaviour by former members of his staff. He's now been banned from having a parliamentary pass and has been suspended from the Labour Party. But Mr Bercow told ITV News he is the victim of a stitch-up, as John Ray now reports.
Order!
In a decade in the hot seat, John Bercow attained near celebrity status.
You don't stand when I'm standing, and that's the end of it.
A voice raised so often in defence of the Commons, raised today in defence of his own tattered reputation.
This process stinks. Indeed, to call it a kangaroo court is deeply unfair and insulting to kangaroos.
And yet, an independent panel has judged him a serial bully and a liar. He was accused of smashing a phone onto a colleague's desk. He repeatedly swore. One MP described how he would lose his temper in the middle of a sentence.
That you're exactly the kind of MP that you would have excluded from the House of Commons.
There is no video evidence. There is no audio evidence. There is no email evidence. There is no text evidence. It's quite manifestly and incontrovertibly a stitch-up.
Order! Order! Since standing down, he's got a sideline selling personalised video messages.
What the government cannot legitimately do...
But he played a real-life starring role in the battle of Brexit, and at Westminster...
treating colleagues with courtesy and respect.
He's still deeply divisive.
In my experience, he often belittled people, even from the chair, left them feeling quite shattered. And certainly outside of the House of Commons chamber, it was all too frequent, and I was often the butt of it, but so too were his staff.
Tonight, one of the complainants, a former staff member, said she feels vindicated. Mr Bercow is banned from holding a Commons pass, and Labour, the party he joined last year, has suspended his membership. John Ray, ITV News, Westminster.
Now, Prince Andrew has paid the multi-million-pound settlement to the woman who accused him of sexual assault. Court documents filed in the United States show the Duke has settled the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre. Now, he claims he never met her. Our royal editor, Chris Shipp, is outside Windsor Castle. Now, Chris, this is going to end the lawsuit as such, but it doesn't mend his reputation necessarily, does it?
You know, Mary, to put it simply, it's over from a legal point of view. There was a filing in New York today called a stipulation of dismissal. And as soon as the judge puts his signature on that, it closes the case down. What it does mean is that Prince Andrew's paid the money, thought to be 10 to 12 million pounds, to his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, remember, the woman he claims he never met, without any admission of liability. Now, Prince Andrew was seen for the first time today. He was seen driving out of Royal Lodge, which is where he lives here on the Windsor estate. We think he was going to see his mother, the Queen, who's in residence here at Windsor Castle, although royal officials never tell us or confirm if there's been a private family meeting. And of course, Mary, for her, there's the relief that in her Platinum Jubilee year, there won't be this big, court case, this big trial at which Virginia Giuffre would have accused the Queen's son of sexual assault. But what is not over is the damage to his reputation. There is simply, for Prince Andrew, no way back from this, no way back into royal life at all.
OK, Chris Shipp in Windsor, thank you. Bit of other news now, and 2 people have been released under investigation after a suspected dog attack killed a baby. The 3-month-old girl died after apparently being mauled by a husky in woodland near Woodhall Spa, Lincolnshire. Police described it as an exceptionally sad incident. The courts heard how a train driver crashed into the buffers at Kirkby Station just moments after sending and receiving WhatsApp messages. Former Merseyrail driver Philip Hollis caused almost £500,000 worth of damage. He was today given a 12-month suspended sentence. And police say that they are aware of this ITV News footage of rapper Dizzy Rascal smashing a photographer's camera. It happened yesterday, just after the musician had been found guilty of assaulting his ex-fiancée. Ed Sheeran sang in the High Court today as he defended himself against allegations of plagiarism. Now, the star is accused of copying a melody used in his hit song Shape of You. He denies the claim, and he used a song by Nina Simone to show just how common he says the melody is in pop music. Ellie Pitt reports.
Ed Sheeran returned to court for more questions over the most streamed song in the history of Spotify. Ross O'Donoghue and Sammy Chokri on the left here claim he copied their track.
I'm in love with the shape of you.
It's alleged Mr Sheeran's 2017 hit Shape of You infringes particular lines and phrases from this, Mr Chokri's single Oh Why, released 2 years earlier, something Mr Sheeran denies. During today's proceedings, he was called an obsessive music squirrel who consumed music voraciously in 2015 and 2016. But the songwriter said he disappeared for the entire year in 2016. He also sang Nina Simone to the court, trying to show how her song Feeling Good would sound the same as Shape of You if sang in the same key. During a strange moment in court, part of an unreleased Ed Sheeran song was accidentally played by his own legal team. Turning to his lawyers, he said, "That's a song I wrote last January. How have you got that?" His barrister later apologised and said it won't happen again. The trial at the High Court continues. Ellie Pitt, ITV News.
Now, Emmerdale's coming up in less than 15 minutes' time, but still to come before that.
People of Scotland, thank you very much. You are a legend.
The Glasgow bakery doing its bit for Ukraine through the power of pastries.
And it's been sunny for some, but will it last? I'll have the latest forecast.
Well, do join me and Alex for all that after the break. And welcome back. Now, some of us, it may not be feeling it yet, but rest assured, spring is on its way. Temperatures could reach as high as 16 degrees Celsius this week in parts of the UK, and Alex is here to tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, I think we could all do with a little bit of cheer at the moment, and I think for recent parts of the UK, they got a fair dose of vitamin D earlier this afternoon. In fact, if we take a look at these pictures, this was the Humber Bridge earlier this afternoon, sparkling in the spring-like sunshine. And this was pretty much the picture across many eastern parts of the UK. Come a little bit further south, this was the Norfolk Broads, Wroxham to be precise, the water glistening there, the swans also lapping up a bit of vitamin D, and nothing really says spring a bit like some lovely daffodils blowing around in the breeze a bit. Well, why is it all going to be turning a little bit milder over the next few days? It's going to have a rise in temperature. This afternoon, we saw a high of 13 degrees Celsius, but as we fast forward into Thursday, we should be seeing a high of 15 degrees Celsius. This is all down to a bit of movement in the jet stream, and that's going to be making its way a little bit further north, and that's going to allow some milder air from the near continent to feed up across the British Isles, particularly across southern parts. It is going to be fairly mild, temperatures at around 4 or 5 degrees above average for the time of year, maybe 9 or 10 further north. So certainly some spring-like sunshine on the way at times, but also the chance of a bit of rain out towards the west, much like they've had today.
OK, so that's what's coming up. What about tomorrow?
Tomorrow's not looking too bad out towards the east yet again, but out towards the west, I'm afraid we do have another weather front moving in. Let's take a look.
It's a cold and wet outlook, with some heavy downpours throughout the day. Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.
OK, so as we head through the next few days, it is going to be turning milder, as I was saying before, but also a little cloudier out towards the east and south. Here's where we're going to hang on to the brighter skies that bit longer. But as I say, some rain at times moving in as well. This is what we've got to come as we head through the next 24 hours. This area of low pressure edges towards us, bumps into the high pressure, which is out towards the far east. So it will stall things. That's why we are going to see the band of rain mainly hugging western coastal parts as we head through the daytime tomorrow. Further east, certainly brighter skies come the afternoon. But as we head through this evening and overnight, it stays relatively cloudy because of the front that we had earlier today making its way across the UK. So a cloudier night to come with a few clear spells here and there. Temperatures on the chilly side, although not as cold as last night, but still out in countryside areas, we could see a bit of frost here and there. So as you wake up tomorrow morning, it's going to be A bit of a gloomy start in parts, but you'll notice the cloud cover out towards the east breaks up very nicely into the afternoon. So really a repeat performance of what we had earlier today, but out towards the west, cloudier skies moving in, outbreaks of rain, and up over the tops of the hills up towards the northwest, where it's going to be that bit chillier, the possibility of a few wintry flurries, but the dizzy heights of 14 degrees in the southeast.
Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.
So is that a promise then? Spring has sprung?
Oh, Mary, don't do that to me, but maybe.
All right. Not committing yourself, I noticed that. Alex, thank you very much indeed for that. And finally tonight, the Glasgow bakery raising more than just bread to support refugees fleeing Ukraine. When the Kachak family saw what was happening to their homeland, they decided to help the best way they knew how. As our Scotland reporter Louise Scott explains.
When organising a bake sale, Ukrainian native Yuri hadn't expected all of his local community to turn up. On Sunday, these Glasgow residents queued for hours around the block to buy cakes and support the cause.
What we did on Sunday showed not just how we feel, but how a lot of people feel. People want to do something, but don't quite know what to do, but actually kind of giving people purpose. This is what we can do. Let's get together and raise some money.
And even today, the support continued.
There's very little we can do here, and that was something to support a bakery.
And he's doing what he can, so we all have to do our bit.
So far, Deanston Bakery has raised £35,000 for the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal. Yuri's mum only left Ukraine 3 years ago. Now she bakes the goods sold at the Glasgow bakery.
I'm here because my family is here, but my heart is very... It's hard to keep positive, to keep happy when you know what is in my country. It's not easy.
Yulia's youngest son, Sergei, spoke to their friends who have fled to Poland and knew they had to help.
Just start quickly, do more than we can do. We boil so much borscht with Julia and people of Scotland. Thank you very much. You are a legend.
This is not just a family united, it's a whole community rising together to support those in desperate need. Louise Scott, ITV News.
And just before we hand over to Raggy about what's coming up on News at 10, a little bit of breaking news on the war in Ukraine. And in the past few minutes, Poland has announced that it's going to hand over all of its MiG fighter jets to the US for use in Ukraine. It says the move will happen immediately, and it's called on all other NATO allies to do the same as a show of solidarity. OK, well, Raggy is in the newsroom. So, Raggy, what else have you got coming up on News at 10?
Hi, Mary. Well, of course, we'll be following up on that breaking news at 10. But also, we saw an incredible reception, didn't we, by President Zelenskyy to MPs in that historic address to the Commons this afternoon. I'll be taking a look at what makes him the great global communicator and symbol, plus the Ukrainian Eurovision Song Contest winner singing her song again to raise money for her country. That's all at 10.
All right, Raggy, thanks for that. And that's all from us for now. I'm Adele's next from all the team here and in Ukraine, of course. Bye-bye.